Good evening and welcome to DC Dispatch. I'm Britney Lavecchia.
And I'm Valeria Martinez.
New tonight, what's next for federal workers following sweeping cuts to government agencies? Young professionals say they're taking a step back from entering the federal workforce amid widespread hiring shakeups. And the latest on tariffs. Experts break down what these taxes mean for domestic prices. Up first, special elections in Florida. Republicans' slim House majority grew by 2 as Trump favorites Randy Fine and Jimmy Patronis win their districts. On the other side of the aisle, liberal judge Susan Crawford was elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court with 55% of the vote. The win comes despite Trump and Musk's push for influence in the race.
The Supreme Court is weighing South Carolina's attempt to defund Planned Parenthood. The case raises whether Medicaid patients can sue in order to pick their preferred health care providers, with growing skepticism from conservative judges.
In Congress, New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker broke the record for longest speech on the Senate floor, a record previously held by Senator Strom Thurmond, who railed against the civil rights movement in 1957.
Elon Musk called USAID a criminal organization that should die.
This seemed like the right thing to do, and from what my staff is telling me, a lot of people watched, and so we'll see what it is. I just think a lot of us have to do a lot more, including myself.
Senator Booker spoke for just over 25 hours, criticizing several administration policies throughout his speech.
And April showers might bring May flowers, but this month's biggest storm could come from Amazon's delayed bid to buy TikTok. The retail giant reportedly made a last-minute offer to acquire the popular video app as it faces the April deadline to separate from its Chinese owner or risk a U.S. ban.
President Trump has implemented broad new tariffs, applying a 10% baseline to most global trading partners. Trump has also imposed tariffs of 104% on China. Economists express worry over potential economic repercussions and impacts on international relations, while stock markets experience a swift downturn. Sarah Augusto has this report.
On April 2nd, President Trump enacted a sweeping set of reciprocal tariffs, including a 10% baseline tariff for all partners, aiming to boost U.S. manufacturing and counter the high trade barriers imposed by other nations. Most economists have seen this as a risky move that threatens to tank the economy and mutilate decades-old relationships. Since Trump's first term, he has sought to reshape the global trade system due to the view that other countries' trade policies harm American manufacturers and workers. Trump has previously imposed 20% duties on all imports from China and 25% duties on steel and aluminum, and extended close to $150 billion worth of downstream products. During Liberation Day, Trump has declared a national economic emergency to launch these tariffs, expecting to reach hundreds of billions of annual revenues. He promises to roll out a set of taxes on imports from other countries that he says will free the U.S. from a reliance on foreign goods. He is fulfilling a key campaign promise as he imposed what he called reciprocal tariffs on trade partners, acting without Congress throughout the 1977 International Emergency Powers Act in an extraordinary attempt to break and reshape America's trading relationship. These higher rates would hit foreign entities that sell more to the U.S. than they buy, meaning these tariffs could stay firmly in place as the administration expects other nations to lower their tariffs and barriers to trade. His advisors say that these tariffs will return strategically vital manufacturing capabilities to the United States. Other economists have warned that these tariffs could slow down the global economy, raise the risk of a recession, and increase living costs for the average U.S. family by thousands of dollars. Even before Liberation Day, concerns over tariffs had already slowed global manufacturing activity, with consumers rushing to make purchases ahead of anticipated price hikes. As Trump has begun to roll out these tariffs, the stock market has seen a nosedive around the world. Contracts tied to major U.S. indexes went down almost 2%, sinking even further in other countries. This leaves concerns for the future of the American economy and trade relations.
Sarah Augusto is in the studio with us for more information. Sarah, how are other countries reacting to President Trump's new tariff policy, and what does this mean for the future of global trade relations?
President Trump has now announced a 3-month pause on all the tariffs that were announced during Liberation Day. This is with the exception of China. The tariffs on China have gone from 104% to 145%. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce has called these tariffs a small step and urges Trump to completely abolish these tariffs. China has seen an economic issue with Europe in the past, and so with these tariffs in place, the European Union could be experiencing an economic crisis. Goods facing the wall of tariffs might cause more products to be dumped in Europe, causing local industries in France, Germany, and Italy to suffer. This war with China has negative implications for the United States' trading relationships. With consistent changes in tariff policies, the future effects of these tariffs remains to be seen.
Thank you, Sarah. Joining us now is Irene Foster, who is a professor of economics with the George Washington University. Thank you so much for coming, Professor Foster.
You're so welcome.
My first question for you is, what are the likely effects of Trump's tariffs, and what does that mean for the U.S. economy?
So I think we've already heard a lot about what the effect of the tariffs might be, and the main thing that everybody's talking about is that it's going to seem like a consumption tax on U.S. consumers. What we mean is that if a tariff is imposed on a foreign product, the foreign producer will try to pass that tax along to U.S. consumers. And so for some products, they'll pass along the full amount of the tax. For some of the products, partial amounts of the tax. And so we will see prices rising across the board. So especially on the goods that are coming into the U.S. But it has further implications. So this morning when I was coming into the office, I learned that our car insurance rates are going to go up. So there are going to be tariffs on automobiles as well as automobile parts that are going to be coming into the U.S. And already car insurance companies know that if my car gets totaled or gets damaged, that they're going to have to pay out more in order to get it fixed or replaced. And so all car insurance rates are going to go up. So like this, we're going to see across the board, even things that you may not link to the tariffs directly, those prices will go up as well.
Wow. And so with the trade war ongoing, what are the long-term effects it may have on consumer prices?
So we were wondering about that and wondering, well, what if Mr. Trump were just to turn around today and say, we're going to stop all the tariffs? Would all the problems go away? Would we not see price pressures in the marketplace? And the answer is not so clear. So the point is that when there's so much uncertainty that's been generated in the marketplace, companies get very jittery. So they don't know at this point, if Mr. Trump today were to say that he's going to stop all the tariffs, whether tomorrow he might come back and say, okay, 150% tariffs on everybody. And so there's a lot of uncertainty on any of on the policies. And so companies are already making decisions about where else they're going to source parts or other products that they might need. And so are our trading partners. So the countries that we trade with are already thinking about where else they can get the products that they buy from the United States. China, for example, buys a lot of soybeans from the United States. They buy a lot of corn from the United States. Now they're going to be looking elsewhere for those products. So once you change a supply chain, it's not so easy to go back to square one.
Wow. And so last month, Trump posted on Truth Social that greatness would be the result of these tariffs. So my question for you is, will greatness be the result if the markets stay the way they are and this trade war continues?
So there are a few things. I'm not quite sure what Mr. Trump means by greatness. One of the things that he has always talked about is that he wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And so that's one of the reasons for all the tariffs. We buy a lot from other countries because we are a rich country. We are the wealthiest country in the world. So of course, it's a fact that we buy more from them than they buy from us. But there are other good things that go on, and I can talk about that in a minute. But if that is what he means by greatness, that is manufacturing coming back to the United States, well, economists aren't quite sure. It may bring manufacturing back to the United States. No one's quite sure of that. But even if manufacturing comes back to the United States, one thing we're absolutely certain about is that it is not going to look the way it looked 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago. If manufacturing does come back to the US, it's all going to be technology-based. Robots are going to be doing jobs in factories, and very few people are going to be employed. And I don't know that people are quite seeing that.
Wow, that's very interesting. Well, this is all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Foster.
Thank you so much.
President Donald Trump's efforts to cut down the federal workforce has led to massive job cuts. DOGE has laid off roughly 60,000 workers in its overhaul of federal agencies. But where do professionals go from here? Faith Wardwell has the story.
In late February, Sarah Russell was laid off from the Office of Personnel Management's Federal Executive Board after more than 30 years in civil service. But she said she refuses to go down without a fight.
I found this whole process so hideous and disrespectful and not how I lead my life. And I absolutely did not want to be even just one more statistic counted for this process.
Russell is among legions of federal workers who've lost their jobs amid President Donald Trump's sweeping moves to slash the federal workforce. But she said the administration's attempt at efficiency is putting employees in dire situations, as many federal workers are faced with buyout proposals.
There's still a lot of hand-wringing. Nobody that I know who did choose to go that route did so happily. Everybody's completely concerned and very upset to take that.
But for young professionals entering the field, the layoffs and federal hiring freeze paint a daunting picture for those hoping to work in government. Wesleyan University senior Susanna Cornell said her internship with an international security firm was abruptly canceled in February after the organization lost its funding from USAID.
Maybe I would be looking into being a paralegal somewhere right now. But I think it's made me feel like I'm going to take a break from my professional career and waitress or live somewhere I've never lived before or work as a barista or something.
I made a joke the other day to one of my good friends. I was like, I'm not even worried about making a government resume at this point, because why would I spend the time? They ask for so much. Why would I put any of that time into an application when it's going to be a dead end and they're not hiring in any space? So.
And an outplacement firm last month found that February saw the most layoffs since the pandemic, with more than 170,000 people losing their jobs. But for employees trying to re-enter the federal workforce, the hiring freeze remains at a near-complete standstill. For DC Dispatch, I'm Faith Wardwell.
A series of Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip marked the end to a 6-week ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will seize large parts of the Gaza Strip with no new peace deal on the horizon. Alexandra Tauber has the latest.
Israeli forces continue their military operations in Gaza, aiming to pressure Hamas into releasing the 24 hostages still believed to be alive. The group also holds the bodies of 35 others killed in the initial attack or while in captivity. But as negotiations stall, the human toll deepens. Over 30,000 Palestinians have been killed. With humanitarian aid largely blocked and food and medical supplies running out, the people of Gaza face catastrophic conditions. Meanwhile, hostage families continue to plead for their loved ones' release.
As long as Hamas is there, the conflict in Gaza and Israel will continue. Not only Hamas, but the other groups that are operating in Gaza. And if they are not dismantled, the United States should work very closely with the Israeli forces to dismantle them, because you cannot have two-state solution with an armed group.
None of my family ever signed up to be in Israel on October 7th. None of my family ever wanted what's going on right now in the Gaza Strip. I have friends who, as Israeli students, or students who have Israeli family, can't share that part of their lives or their identities, because to do so they'd be shunned purely on the basis of them being Jewish and having Israeli family.
The war has also ignited debates in Washington, with President Donald Trump making headlines for his comments on Gaza.
No other president would ever say that, but that this president says. And what is the effect of that on this process? Is that helping the peace process? Probably not. What it does is it strengthens Hamas's position, because Hamas can now say, see, they're just a bunch of imperialists on the side of Israel. That actually hurts the peace process by strengthening a terrorist organization. That's the last thing you want to do.
The fate of Israeli hostages remain uncertain. Hamas is still believed to have 59 hostages remaining in captivity in Gaza. Of these, 24 are believed to be alive, while the bodies of 35 others are also being held.
US should have a far-reaching approach. That is to create a two-state solution, but ensure that Hamas and all the other armed groups are dismantled.
Traditional media coverage, like I said, it tends to reflect U.S. foreign policy, so it might have a tinge of a sort of more likely to show us the Israeli perspective on things, just because that's our foreign policy. People just need to be much more media literate. They need to be much more careful about the media they consume and thinking about, well, what is this perspective and how do I get other perspectives and what am I really learning here?
More than 140,000 Palestinians have been ordered to evacuate Rafah as Israel intensifies its pressure against Hamas. Many had only just returned to their homes after the ceasefire, now forced to flee again to areas still unsafe. Inside Gaza, rare public protests have erupted against Hamas, with residents demanding accountability and denouncing the group's leadership amid worsening humanitarian conditions. Meanwhile, Israel is pushing for the release of Alexandra, the last living American-Israeli hostage, along with 10 others as part of a proposed 40-day ceasefire. The framework would also require Hamas to provide full information on the condition and status of all remaining hostages. Back in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing backlash from hostage families after referring to his recently arrested aides as hostages, a comment many have condemned as deeply insensitive. Both political pressure and humanitarian conditions continue to worsen. From DC Dispatch, I'm Alexandra Tauber.
Joining us now is Nathan Brown, who is a professor of political science and international affairs at the George Washington University. Welcome, Professor.
Thanks for having me.
My first question for you is, why do you think the government has taken a step back in terms of urgency when it comes to rescuing the hostages?
Well, you talked about for the Israeli government? Yes. Yeah, for the Israeli government, they've never really prioritized the hostages. They don't say that publicly because the hostages are a very emotional issue, and there's an awful lot of pressure from some within Israeli society to get the hostages back, to do whatever is necessary. But any kind of deal on the hostages would require some kind of ongoing ceasefire. The goals that the Israeli government articulated from the beginning were to destroy Hamas's military capability and them as a governing force. And so any kind of agreement that leaves those intact would be one that would essentially be a climb down for the government. It's not one they're interested in making.
Along with that, what do you think is preventing both sides from finalizing the ceasefire?
Well, from the beginning, they've been fighting different wars. Hamas basically wanted to get some hostages so that they could place themselves basically at the center of Palestinian politics, center of global attention, and so on. So that was their goal. The Israeli government, as I said, announced very, very different war aims. And so those are basically just two different positions. When the ceasefire was negotiated in January, right before the Trump administration came in, it was agreed to very reluctantly by the Israeli government because they really wanted to get off on the right foot with the Trump administration. The Trump administration wanted to pause on the fighting. But I don't think there was ever really an intention of the Israeli government to turn that ceasefire into anything ongoing. They always had in mind that Israel and Israel alone would be responsible for its own security in Gaza, and that would require some ongoing presence, and that negotiations with Hamas were not going to get that.
We're talking about other countries. Do you think that this issue and not being able to finalize this war affects international diplomacy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it makes it very, very difficult, I think, to do any kind of international diplomacy in the region. There are a number of conflicts that are going on, but this is sort of central to them. So when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Iran, when it comes to anything involving Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen, and so on, the ongoing war in Gaza makes any kind of regional diplomatic solution, I think, much more difficult.
Do you think, or do you believe that our government is doing a sufficient job on calming the conflict going on in our own soil to the conflict abroad?
I think we live in a very, very polarized society, and I think that the policy approach right now of the Trump administration essentially leans fairly heavily, and it basically says that number one, Israel should do what it what it wants in Gaza. And at home, they've really prioritized the issue of anti-Semitism, equating protests against the Israeli military campaign sometimes with anti-Semitism. So I don't think just the flavor of American politics today is about bridging differences at all. It's all about your side winning.
And lastly, do you think that there will ever be a solution to a conflict that has existed for ages?
Yes, but probably not in my lifetime. Honestly, I think that right now that just the level of trauma in Palestinian society and in Israeli society after October 7th is just so deep, and there's simply no diplomatic process that exists right now to resolve it. Ultimately, I think both Israeli Jews, Palestinians, they're not going anywhere. They will find a way to live with each other, but it may be a generation or two before they find a path.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor.
Thank you.
After a commercial aircraft collided mid-air with a military helicopter over Washington, D.C. early this year, flight anxiety for many has soared. But experts are assuring flyers that flying remains the safest mode of transportation there is. Christina Stasis has more.
A recent string of aviation incidents at the beginning of this year has left flyers worrying over the safety of the nation's airspace. There have been a couple high-profile aviation incidents so far in 2025, including a Delta Airlines regional jet carrying 80 people that crashed and flipped in Toronto in February, but thankfully was not fatal. The most haunting crash of this year occurred in January. A mid-air collision between an American Airlines regional jet and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., which left no survivors.
As I said earlier, they don't seem to be related. Mid-air collision like we had at National, is a lot different than the aircraft in Korea landing on its belly and then colliding with something at the end of the runway, or past the end of the runway, I should say.
The Federal Aviation Association is experiencing workforce slashes under the Trump administration, with around 400 workers being cut, including those in charge of creating air navigation maps used by air traffic controllers. Given the timing of these firings, experts are worried about the impact it may have on aviation safety.
The FAA is responsible for the national airspace system to work for all of its users. And all of a sudden it was, wait a minute, we're not getting these updates. Oh, wait a minute, there are hundreds of updates that go on a regular basis. Updates, incidents, updates, different little pieces that all go together to make this overall system work, the emergent system.
Experts are still asserting that flying is the safest mode of transportation, despite all the recent aviation incidents and crashes. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, the number of crashes in January of this year was actually lower than last year, even though these crashes and incidents are still raising concerns about safety among the public.
People always say, like, oh, driving a car is like just as bad as being in the sky, so I try to keep that in mind, but it's definitely hard when it's on the forefront of the news, all of the different crashes, especially when it's in our backyard.
In the studio with us now is Christina Stasis. Christina, what's the latest?
The FAA workforce being cut is making travelers wary of flying, and the DCA airport has seen passenger traffic drop significantly since the fatal January crash. That, along with other incidents of aircrafts flying too close and physical altercations between air traffic controllers, have shaken flyers' confidence in the airport. As a result, the FAA is increasing support and oversight for the air traffic controller team, which includes 2 more operational supervisors, a reviewing of the airport's arrival rate per hour, and regular wellness checks for staff. On the DCA front, the National Transportation Safety Board released a preliminary investigation report into the crash that showed at least 1 close call each month between a commercial plane operating at DCA and a helicopter from 2011 to 2014. Jennifer Homendy, the chairman of the NTSB, called the flight patterns around DCA an intolerable risk. We are still waiting on the full investigation from the NTSB, which is set to take about a year.
Thank you, Christina. Efforts to end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are gaining traction, with big names like Target taking aim. But do customers think they hit the bullseye? Rebecca Marsalese has the story.
Across the United States, Target has become more than just a retail store. It's part of American culture, synonymous with casual, enjoyable shopping. However, at the start of the Trump administration, Target announced it would phase out a handful of DEI initiatives, such as a program designed to help Black employees build meaningful careers and promote Black-owned businesses, updating their, quote, belonging in the bullseye strategy, including the end of their racial equity, action, and change initiatives.
As a Black woman, it really sucks. Going to Black-owned businesses, I don't know, because that experience sucked too sometimes, so I don't know. I just feel like we all need to pray, because things are getting heavy now, especially with this Donald Trump in office and his little minion.
The Minneapolis-based company, which operates nearly 2,000 stores nationwide and employs more than 400,000 people, said it long intended to end the program this year, but its announcement came after other prominent American corporations scaled back on their diversity activities.
Especially since it's such a big company and DEI is, like, it's a given for any big company to have something like that. And like me being a woman, Hispanic, and like in the corporate world, DEI is super important to me, and it's like something I advocate for when I was in college, in high school, and like now. So yeah, that's my long spilled answer, but I won't be coming back.
Target has faced backlash from consumers and shareholders since the retailer announced on January 24th that it would end its DEI initiatives. And starting on March 5th, 2025, more than 100,000 people are pledging to abstain from shopping at Target.
It's important to me, and I would rather shop at businesses that don't support that decision.
While, according to Forbes, we must wait until the next quarter to see any significant financial fallout from consumer boycotts, marketing experts agree that Target may be at a particular risk due to the expansive nature of these protests. Target has seen a loss of foot traffic for the 8th consecutive week, extending a losing streak that began days after they announced it would end their DEI program. Management did not immediately respond to comment. From DC Dispatch, I'm Rebecca Marsalese.
Next up, major developments in the nation's capital as the Trump administration pushes for home rule. We'll see what this means for the districts most vulnerable.
DC's drag community is finding strength within unity. Coming up, we'll discuss how they're pushing back and building their community in the face of opposition.
And the latest with the Metro. The Purple Line promises better connections, but will it deliver on that promise? You won't want to miss it.
Welcome back. President Donald Trump is calling for federal control over Washington, D.C., placing the blame locally. His latest remark reignite debates over home rule and how the city should handle its unhoused population. Luci Garza has the story.
Donald Trump has recently said that he wishes for the federal government to quote-unquote take over D.C. and bring home rule back to the district. He specifically called out local leaders in what he believes are failed efforts to reduce crime, clean up graffiti, and dismantle homeless encampments. What Trump's claims fail to acknowledge are the local initiatives that are ongoing to support and uplift those in the homeless community, rather than penalizing them for their current situation. Chris Rutledge, the vice president of Friendship Place, a local housing provider for those facing homelessness in the D.C. area, says that clearing encampments is not the proper approach.
But I can think the bottom line, one thing we do want to stress is that what we know historically and statistically is that encampment clearings don't end homelessness. You have to have tools in place to help people. after you've done that clearing.
Rutledge also said that despite no executive order being signed yet, Friendship Place is still working to prepare to support an uptick of residents in need of assistance with getting back on their feet or reclaiming personal documents that were lost during encampment sweeps.
What happens here is people's lives are just tossed in a dumpster, and you see that all the time. People have vital papers, documents that they need in order to, to get a job or to get a home.
If this executive order is later signed, those now actively facing homelessness could face real legal penalties and have their homeless encampments and valuables swept. On a recent trip aboard Air Force One, President Trump spoke to reporters about the need to end homelessness in D.C., which he claims has to do in part with upkeeping the city's vision for foreign visitors.
It's a sad thing, homeless people all over the place, and we got to take care of the homeless, but can't have that in Washington, D.C.
While Trump claims that he and Mayor Bowser have a positive relationship, Bowser has pushed back against Trump's idea of reinstating home rule.
We will brief the president, give him the facts, work with him cooperatively on our shared priorities and areas where he has concerns.
Still, Congress has reintroduced legislation for the Bringing Oversight to Washington and Safety to Every Resident bill, whose acronym is the Bowser Bill. In addition to eliminating homeless encampments, the bill also targets city beautification and public safety, despite a decline in crime reported by the D.C. Police Department in 2024. Rutledge said that many residents of Friendship Place still stress frustration that lawmakers do not equate them with the same respect as someone who is housed.
When you see encampment clearing legislation or legislation making being unhoused illegal, you're buying into that belief that these are not fellow human beings worthy of respect and who are valued.
Whether or not D.C. will be taken over by federal rule, Rutledge wants to continually remind Washingtonians that those in encampments are our neighbors too. The White House announced this executive order on February 10th, but nothing has been signed as of yet. I'm Luci Garza for District Dispatch.
LGBTQ plus rights face renewed challenges. Shifts in the political landscape under the Trump administration continue to reshape the fight for equality in the LGBTQ plus and drag community. Nanako Kondo reports from Washington.
At Shakers, D.C., Jared Simish, also known by his drag name Gray, as well as fellow queens from across the DMV area prepare for a high-energy lip-sync battle, where audience reactions determine the winner of a $100 prize. But for many, drag isn't just about fashion competition or fame, it's activism. As debates over LGBTQIA plus rights continue under the Trump administration, his story reflects sentiments shared nationwide.
The way that the political climate has affected my drag, it has honestly pushed me a little bit to get myself out there more than I already am.
On January 20th of this year, President Donald Trump signed an executive order titled Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. This order mandates that the federal government recognizes only two sexes, male and female, while directing agencies to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Since then, Trump has issued a series of executive orders, including bans on transgender women in women's sports, restrictions on transgender people serving openly in the military, and prohibitions on minors receiving gender-affirming medical care. Dr. Aiko Strader, Associate Professor of Public Policy, Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, and Sociology at George Washington University, comments on the concerning nature of these initiatives, as well as efforts to cut federal funding to schools that teach certain topics related to race, sex, gender, or politics.
What's concerning is that they are choosing which information to provide and which information to not provide. If they believe in less government intervention, then they should make everything available for people to see.
Despite these concerns, Jared remains defiant and hopeful, finding strength in his identity and community.
We're here, we're queer, we're going to stay here. That's not going to change. And nothing that they can do can erase us from our presence here.
As this new administration's policies take shape, the implications this will have on LGBTQIA plus rights remain a critical point of focus and conversation. How this new administration's policies will affect diversity, equality, and freedom of expression will remain to be seen. Nanako Kondo, Washington, D.C.
The construction of the long-awaited Purple Line is taking shape and will connect suburban hubs in Maryland. Seowon Kim has the latest.
The Washington Metro has been a major transportation for connecting Virginia and Maryland to Washington, D.C. ever since the opening in 1979. All 6 lines are focused on transporting passengers from outside Washington to downtown. The lines typically begin outside the city, pass through the downtown, and ends again outside the city.
Every day, go to work and then come home.
Not only the Washington Metro, but each state's regional rail, VRE and MARC, and Amtrak also serve the same role of transporting passengers around each state to downtown Washington, D.C. But now there's a new addition to the region's transportation landscape. The long-awaited Purple Line is set to change the way people move around within Maryland. Unlike the current Metro, the Purple Line will not enter Washington, D.C. Instead, it will connect east and west of Maryland with 21 stops from Bethesda to New Carrollton. Furthermore, the Purple Line will be in a form of light rail, which is also different from the traditional Washington Metro lines. As it is Maryland's regional transportation, the Maryland Department of Transportation will be in charge of operation. This is different from other lines which are run by the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, WMATA. Currently, the authorities are expecting late 2027 as the opening date.
Real excited. I expect for the less traffic and a lot of things, open up jobs for other people, so.
From what could be seen at New Carrollton, the construction appears to be progressing smoothly. As a complete new dimension of Washington Metropolitan Area transportation, the excitement for Purple Line is building. From New Carrollton, Purple Line construction site, DC Dispatch, this is Seowon Kim.
Streaming wars are heating up, with price hikes and ad-supported tiers reshaping how we stay entertained.
The RFK Stadium sits empty. What's next for the iconic site?
All that and your forecast next.
Welcome back. The Philadelphia Zoo welcomes some new tortoises this month. At nearly 100 years old, Galapagos tortoises Mommy and Abrazo welcomed 4 new hatchlings. The zoo says these hatchlings are part of their vision for a thriving population of the tortoises 100 years from now.
College basketball fans enjoyed the last games of the season as the NCAA champions were crowned. On the women's side, UConn beat South Carolina 85-59, winning their 12th national title. And for the men, number 1 seed Florida beat number 1 seed Houston 65-63 in a tight game to close out the season of broken brackets, with no Cinderella stories in the finals.
After a lucrative deal to keep several DC sports teams in the Capital One Arena, the future of RFK Stadium remains uncertain with the return of Trump to Washington. Thomas Chritton has more.
Keep going, man. We do it at the end. We do it in the end. We do it in the end. We do it in the end, baby.
In 1996, the team then known as the Washington Redskins played their final season of professional football for the NFL at RFK Stadium. The stadium now sits dormant and surrounded by fences waiting to be demolished. It is clear that this will be a tedious process which first began in 2023. The last team to use the stadium was DC United, the Major League Soccer team, which still displays a merchandise storefront visible from the outside of the fence. The long-term future of RFK Stadium will be dependent on conversations and decisions between the federal government and the District of Columbia. On February 13th, DC Mayor Muriel Bowser has made public pitches to bring the Washington Commanders back to the city.
Is until we have a modern stadium, we will not be able to host events that the world is used to, including the World Cup, including a Super Bowl, and yes, Beyonce and Taylor Swift.
After Bowser's speech, several audience members raised key points. Potentially high cost to taxpayers, a smaller stadium with less parking, green spaces surrounding the stadium, and traffic congestion in the area.
Bring the DC Commander games. If they want to bring them back into DC, that'd be great. But, if they don't want to do that, maybe turn to a green space. It'd be fantastic. I mean, personally, I think, bringing even like something like F1 to DC would be pretty cool. But
the Biden administration signed an order to give the land to the district for the next 99 years for the city to either revitalize or demolish the old stadium. With Trump back in the White House, his actions revolving around D.C. and RFK Stadium remains to be seen, given the strong push for federal control to replace much of the city's governance. Crowds used to fill the stands all the way to the roof cheering for their favorite sports teams. All eyes are on Mayor Bowser and the D.C. government's plan to turn the currently empty space around to something far better. For the Washington, D.C. Commanders, the future seems mostly decided. Under the Biden administration, the land was given to the D.C. government for the next 99 years. However, it's up to the Commanders and Mayor Muriel Bowser to revitalize the land. I'm Thomas Chritton, DC Dispatch.
As spring brings flower blooms to the district, other parts of the U.S. are seeing fluctuations, some due to climate change. Kartik McCullough has more.
Americans across the country have faced a series of devastating extreme weather events in the first quarter of 2025. In January, Los Angeles County was engulfed by the Eaton and Palisade fires, which burned over 23,000 acres of land. The fires destroyed more than 5,000 homes and claimed the lives of over 25 people. Insured losses are estimated to be almost $30 billion, making it the costliest wildfire event in United States history. February brought severe storms to the southeastern United States, with some parts of Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky experiencing unprecedented rainfall. The floods led to at least 15 deaths and over 1,000 water rescues in Kentucky alone. Then, in March, a powerful storm system produced over 90 tornadoes across multiple states, including Missouri, Texas, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Texas and Oklahoma in particular faced severe wind-driven wildfires, with Oklahoma alone reporting 130 fires burning through 173,000 acres of land. Researchers from NASA have found that rising global temperatures have contributed to prolonged droughts, intensifying wildfires, and higher levels of flooding. President Trump's administration has already made news for pledging to cut EPA funding by more than 65%. Scientists have expressed their concern that this could hinder the nation's ability to address severe weather events. It remains to be seen whether Trump will listen to these concerns or continue his warpath against environmental protection initiatives at the cost of American lives.
Kartik McCullough joins us now in the studio for the latest on weather.
Thanks, Valeria. Take a look behind me. This is some satellite imagery from NOAA. If you can see the yellow swirls on the East Coast, that's the storm system that caused unprecedented flooding and tornadoes from 2 weeks ago making its way out. However, as you can see from those yellow swirls on the West Coast, another storm system is making its way through the plains and the Midwest. This is going to mean some very late snowfall in places like Colorado and Nebraska. Parts of the Midwest and South, however, are getting hit with another wave of tornado warnings. So far this year, we've already seen over 470 tornadoes, well above average for mid-April, and we're still early in the season. Thankfully, as you can see with this handy guide behind me, the warning levels for these tornadoes are reported from marginal to likely, a far cry from the level 5 tornado warnings in these states that we saw a couple weeks ago. Even so, if you have any loved ones in these affected areas, make sure to check in on them and make sure they're doing all they can to stay safe. Thankfully, those of us in DC do not have to worry about the severe weather outlook. It's going to be pretty sunny and a little chilly on Wednesday and Thursday, with highs peaking in the low 60s and lows bottoming out at 40 degrees. Temps are warming up to kick off the weekend, with highs in the mid-70s throughout the week. We're looking at a pretty consistent cloud cover to go with this, except for a light drizzle forecasted on Saturday evening. So make sure to at least bring a rain jacket.
Thank you, Kartik. Streaming platforms are rapidly evolving, with price increases at deals and growing competition reshaping the way we access our content. Abigail Brubaker takes a closer look at the forces driving these changes and what they mean for the future of streaming.
That iconic sound introduced the world to streaming, with dozens of other platforms following in its footsteps, all in the pursuit of creating must-see content at viewers' fingertips.
Netflix was the only game in town for a while, and it was pretty exciting. Whenever a series dropped all its episodes, people just watched all its episodes. But streamers like Disney got smart very fast, and they started to just drop by week, so you had to go back every week.
While Netflix started it all with this enormous content library, services have changed the model to fit their needs, often releasing episodes weekly to keep subscribers for longer. Specialty platforms continue to be created for untapped audiences, from those who want their shows for free with ads to Anglophiles.
Streaming has changed everything, but it hasn't sent the linear TV folks packing, because the corporations that own linear TV are getting into streaming.
As streaming becomes more popular, network television feels the pressure to keep audiences. A new competitor has come to town and they want a piece of it. Paramount Plus, Peacock, and Hulu's partnership with ABC are the network's answers to streaming. But while streamers have their perfectly curated libraries of shows and movies, traditional television still has a grasp on live broadcasting, especially sports. Or so they thought.
All of that I watch through Disney Plus with the bundle. So, Blackhawks, go Blackhawks from Illinois. So I watch all of those games on Disney Plus.
Streaming is also getting into the news business. Amazon Prime Video partnered with Brian Williams for live election night coverage, the first for the platform. Streaming doesn't have all live programming, so some consumers continue to pay for cable on top of streaming. Some platforms have tiered pricing as well, having subscribers pay more to not have ads. With all the added costs, some subscribers are sharing accounts with friends and family. Platforms have made efforts to restrict this practice, but some viewers think that is a step too far.
I also hate the one person a house, one thing to a house ban, because I used to go to boarding school, so I was like, what? You're gonna make a 14-year-old pay for Netflix? I had no income.
Streaming platforms have changed over the years and the sentiments towards them as well. We will see how these changes impact viewers as well as companies. For DC Dispatch, I'm Abigail Brubaker.
That's all we have for you tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us on DC Dispatch. We will see you again. Good night.